Connecting, starting. Hey, everybody. Welcome to my weekly live stream on Substack. Very excited to have this conversation today. My name is Bobby Umar, and I'm here with my friend, colleague, client, but also someone I admire and doing some really cool things is John McGraw. And today we're going to talk about TEDx talks as well as cross-cultural interactions in the workplace, because that's a big thing that he loves to talk about. But he's also, a TEDx speaker like I am. So, very excited. Thanks so much for coming by, John, today.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here, Bobby, as always. A good opportunity to catch up and hopefully go a good conversation, not but just between us, but everybody
Yeah.
else is dropping in too. And hey, everybody. So,
Yeah, and I see people coming. Andrew's coming in, Rich is coming in. Great. You can put your comments or questions in the chat, no problem. We are here to just have a little conversation. Now, I'm doing a weekly live stream on Substack every Friday at 4 p.m. We started a bit late because we have some technical hiccups, but now we are here. We'll start with some introductions. I mean, and I'll let John introduce himself, and then I'll do my introduction. John, introduce yourself to everybody here.
sure. So, what to say about myself? I'm a multicultural workplace expert, an inclusive communication specialist, human connection speaker. I basically got into doing this after living and working in Japan for several years, where I just got very fascinated with culture, and actually being in Japan helped me to learn about Canadian culture because I didn't really think we had one, like a lot of us kind of grow up here. And I talk about some of the challenges of integrating international talent. And I've done workshops. I speak. As you said, I've done a couple of TEDx talks. Thanks very much to all of the help, and coaching and everything that you've given me, Bobby. And one of them, the first one, actually just went live last week, which is amazing, right? Yeah, it's an amazing feeling, I gotta say. So
Awesome.
that's for
Yeah.
me.
So,
Yeah.
so to be clear, John is a two-time TEDx speaker,
Yeah.
and I'm very excited about that because he was part of my TEDx program to help him land TEDx talk, and getting two of them so quickly and so close together, that was fantastic. So I'm really grateful for that. We'll talk a bit about the impact of TEDx and what it can do for you. But myself, so I'm a five-time TEDx speaker. I'm also a four-time TEDx event, I guess, invite rejector. What I've been doing for the last 25 years is I've done 1,000 keynotes workshops across four continents. I initially talked about soft skill leadership, became a personal brand expert, then I became an expert in networking and authentic connection. My first TEDx talk was on authentic connection. And now at this point, I became a digital influencer and marketer with 750,000 followers across all social media. And so now, what I do is I do three things. One is I do keynotes and workshops on vulnerable storytelling, how to leverage LinkedIn and love it, and how to do thought leadership or personal branding and digital marketing. And then the other thing I do is I help coach people to land a TEDx talk and use it to elevate their authority, their trust, their brand, whether they're trying to do more speaking or build their business or elevate their status. But that's the other thing I do. And the third thing I do is really focus on Substack. Substack is targeted mostly to business owners, entrepreneurs, those with a little bit about leadership developments, edge. They're trying to elevate themselves wherever they are, and I focus on them. And I host a small membership community called TLB Club, which is for small business owners to help level up their game, to not only increase their monetization of their strategy and their sales by 20-50% per year, but also to save time through automation tools, integration tools, and of course, my love of AI. So that's kind of what I do. If you have been following me on Substack, I appreciate it. If you were following John, that's great. Welcome aboard to the conversation. The reason why we're talking about cross-cultural workplace challenges and issues because that's what John's main thing is. And I'm going to talk about it because I have lots of experience and stories around this issue, which I'm happy to share a story about it. And I think that's going to be great. I see Tim Jacob, the TLB Club, fire, fire. Good. Yeah, TLB Club. You can check it out. And let me talk a bit about TLB Club. So we have a weekly coaching call. We have a weekly Claude co-working session. We have monthly tech clinics, monthly LinkedIn clinics. We have a bi-weekly masterclass with a guest expert speaker. Where we bring in people. We just had one just yesterday where we talked about Claude Code, and it was mind blowing. It was actually pretty amazing. And members get access to all that as well as each other, the in-house experts. They get access to our 225 plus masterclass library of all these amazing experts that I brought to my network. And if you want to learn more about it, come by one of our calls. as my guest. Just ping me, just DM me here anytime, anywhere in Substack. You can come as my guest once, maybe twice, and I'll say, you know what, if you're liking this, join the community. It's not, it's a good investment. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And actually, on Substack, there's the free version of my Substack. There's the tier one, tier two version, which is like $7 a month for more special benefits, which you could take a look at on my website. But tier three, that's the next level. That's actually you joining TLB Cloud for 6 months. So if you want to take a look at that, that's a great option. You'll get a lot of great resources. So let's first get into the TEDx talk. So when we first started, you wanted to talk about the cross cultural challenge. So tell us, John, why it was so important for you to talk about that.
Well, I think for me, it was when I came back to Canada. Uh, I continued, my previous career, I was an ESL, English as a second language instructor. And I really didn't start thinking about it deeply until after I came back to Canada. And I would find, my wife is in HR, and she was also a newcomer, an immigrant to Canada as well. And compared to a lot of newcomers, she actually had a pretty smooth transition, but she was working with newcomers, doing volunteering on the side. And through her, I got to see a lot of the challenges that many newcomers to Canada face. And we're not talking about people who don't have any kind of talents. We're talking about people with master's degrees, people who are highly skilled, who could really contribute a lot in many ways to Canada. But because they couldn't communicate their experience in the way that we expect in Canada, because they come from different environments, I think it's a loss for them, and it's a loss for businesses in Canada as well. And in particular, one aspect that's common in Canadian culture and some other cultures as well is, when you want an opportunity, you speak up for it, right? Okay, talk up. Okay, you want a promotion at work, you speak up about it. Um, in many other cultures around the world, that's kind of almost forbidden. It's considered a real faux pas to do
Yeah.
that, and it can
Right.
actually damage your career if you go to your manager and say, "Hey, I see that there's this opportunity, for a supervisory position. I'd be interested in that." They'll say, like, "Who are you talk about that?" We make that decision. So to make that kind of transition is very hard. When you've grown up with that, like imagine going to another culture, like where I talked about, where we grew up, where we talk about ourselves, and you go to a place where you're not supposed to do that. Like imagine how hard that would be. It's the same going the other way as well. So I got very passionate about, okay, how can we bridge that divide, bridge that gap, bridge that understanding? So that's what got me so fascinated about talking about this. And I know the value of the TEDx talk is that you can do far more with that than say just doing one-to-one coaching or even facilitation, because then it's something that's out there that everyone can see. And also because of the TEDx brand, then that lends great legitimacy to that and can open up more opportunities as well, because they say, oh, well, look, this person's a real authority. They've gotten a TEDx talk. So that's why I explored that. And that's why ultimately I, reached out to you, because my wife mentioned, hey, there's this guy, Bobby Umar, you might want to have a conversation with. And we did that, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I like the cross cultural issue or challenge because in my work, when I first started out, my first TED talk was called "The Power of Connection," and a big part of it was how to connect with people. And one of the things that my wife would say is, Bob, you're really good at connecting with anybody, no matter what their background or let's say political stripes. Because she's like, oh, how do you? We were on a bus one time in Mexico, and there was a couple of people from the U.S. and they were talking about how much they love George W. Bush. And I was like, and I started engaging them, like I went in, and next thing you know, they were like, oh yeah, and they were quite impressed with how. She was impressed by how I got them to open up about some of his flaws or his issues, which normally that people wouldn't do. But I was like, and I did that, and for me, like, and I have a lot of also faux pas, in my life where And here, I'll give you two examples in two different stories. So one story is I was teaching international MBA students on how to speak and engage better. And one of the things I had to explain to them is, look, in Canada, we want your real opinion. And I had to really explain that to them because I knew that they did not want to do that. And so I tried to make that really, really clear in the conversation. But I also made a bonehead move where I typically my bonehead moves are typically when I try to be funny because I just naturally improvise and shoot the whatever and and so, I used to play badminton all the time with a bunch of people years ago, and there was this guy, and he was an Asian guy, and he always, whenever he missed a shot, he'd be like, "Hey, yeah," and he would do that and get frustrated. And so, so I did that as a joke in the class, and it did not go well. I was like, "Oh man,
Mm,
that was a bad joke." It was like 15 years ago. I was like, "Oh man, I can't believe," you know. And maybe they don't care. In my head, I thought I'm just an idiot, but I said that, and what are you gonna do? But most of the kids loved me, and it was really great. We had a good time. So once in a while, my jokes will land. Sometimes they don't land because I think I'm trying to understand their culture and back and forth, and and things like that. And then the other story I have is this is kind of funny. I'm Pakistani. My family's from Pakistan. I was born in Canada, but my entire family's from Pakistan. But when I went to Pakistan, there is this. I'm a westernized, as my mom says, you're kind of white, and so when I went there, I was at this dinner, and this guy, the host, the father, put this gigantic piece of lamb on my plate, and I was like, I'm sorry, I am full, I am not eating this, and he was offended, and I was like, well,
mm,
and I knew the culture that they put stuff on your plate and they make you eat it, right? And then me saying I don't want to eat it was kind of an insult, but I was like I literally could not eat this thing. I was like, how do I do this? And so I basically just apologized, "Please, I'm so sorry. I'm so full." And I just said the food was amazing, and your wife who cooked was amazing. This house is beautiful. I love this food, but I'm so full, and if I have a little bit, is there dessert? I want some that dessert over there. And I just like did all this thing, and I turned into a joke. He eventually laughed it off, and then okay, fine, fine. And then we took the. It was basically a rack of lamb, like a bone with the meat on it. You can imagine, it's like, ka-toom. And I was like, oh, wow, how did I do that? So, even in my own culture, in my own race, these things can happen. So, but in the workplace, it happens all the time. Lots of cultural, and I can think of so many other examples. And so I think it's important to have this conversation because I think in the workplace too. I think the bigger challenge is that the context of work and the context of the professional atmosphere changes a lot of the dynamics versus hanging out with your friends and joking around. And so, it comes to that. I mean, what would you say? How does one, keep that in perspective?
yeah, well, I actually wanna talk a little bit more about your lamb
Yeah, yeah,
situation as
go
well,
for it. Yeah,
because I think
yeah,
it does actually connect with it in some ways because it's interesting because, um one thing that comes up, oftentimes, is advice of like, okay, well, how do I adjust to a different culture? And oftentimes, you get two extremes of advice. It's like, okay, well, just be yourself. Just do, just be yourself, and people will appreciate that. Or the other thing is, okay, well, you're do as the expression goes, do as the Romans do, right? To blend in, to show respect. And I think really it comes down to like if you're doing either extreme, then you're going to lose out in some way or another. Because if you just let's be honest, depending on the circumstances, depending on um, being your being yourself exactly like as you said, joking around with your friends or something like that in some circumstances, that could be potentially damaging to your career or damaging in some ways. But then if you just completely do the other thing where it's uh, just okay, let's do as everyone else does, is you're not it's going to be stressful because you're kind of hiding who you are and
yeah.
you're trying to sort of you copy what's not natural to you. And then that's going to come across as inauthentic as well. So, taking that example of what you talked about with the lamb, it's like you kind of sort of did it somewhere in the middle, right? Because
I did.
because you didn't just go ahead and eat it and just with no complaints and then feel sick afterwards, and you didn't you didn't just sort of say, well, well, you did reject it, but you did it in a way kind of, oh, very apologetic about it because you understood. You understood. Oh, okay, well, normally maybe just at home or something, you can just say, oh, well, I'm full. But you understood that how they were going to potentially react, so you kind of played along with it. And I think in some ways that's really what it comes down to, even in workplace situations. So, and what I mean is figuring out like what is the sweet spot. Are you going to? So, for example, okay, let's talk about um, someone. If we go from the perspective of someone adapting to Canada, promoting
Sure.
yourself, or maybe maybe an easier fit might be like say a Canadian or someone like a North American adapting to different circumstances. Where, for example, say in meetings in Japan, for example, you don't generally kind of shout out your opinion, which is kind of the opposite here, right? Where you're expected, like giving your opinion shows that you're engaged, shows that you have ideas. But there you kind of maybe don't bring up complaints, if you disagree, because there's that. But if you're, say, a someone who's adapting, who's not from the culture, it's kind of like, okay, maybe I can pick my moments. So I'm not going to necessarily shout out all the time what my opinion is, but where's a moment where I might be able to throw it in there, kind of strategically, and leveraging the fact that, well, oh, I'm not from here, so I kind of can get away. At least in Japan, it's very often like if you're a foreigner, you can kind of get away with doing things that are outside of the expectations of what's put on the Japanese, for example, and say, I'm not sure if this is the best idea. Like, what do we think about this?
Mm.
And oddly enough, many of the locals might appreciate it. It's like, oh, thanks, you could do that because I couldn't get away with that kind of thing. And I think that's also true as well because you're finding your sweet spot. You're being true, but you're just kind of you're holding back a little bit. Like you wouldn't do it necessarily as much as you would maybe in your home culture, but you're still getting yourself out there. And I think it's psychologically it's easier to do that rather than just going to one extreme or the other. And then you're still showing some respect because you're not doing it necessarily all the time. You're picking your moments, or the way you're phrasing it. It might be a little bit different, but you're still doing it. So I can see that that rack a lamb analogy
Yeah.
works more than you might think in different
Yeah, and
situations.
it's funny in this call, I'm randomly coming with stories from my life that, and I'm thinking of more and more as you're talking because this is actually more than you realize, and I think that's important for us to understand. Now, people are commenting, and we're doing a live stream here on Substack. We're talking about cross cultural issues in the workplace. We're talking about TEDx talks. Lynn Williams there, hey, say happy Friday. She just said, and she mentioned individualism
Mhm.
versus collectivism,
Yes,
which is interesting.
yes,
Um,
yes.
can you briefly tell me what that is?
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, it's basically the approach of being an individualistic society. So when we think about like Western society, so Western European, okay, Western Europe, North America, for example, there's a lot of focus on our individuality, individual freedom. What we want to do versus collectivism, which is a good part of the world where you're more focused on, okay, what is my role in the group, and what I do affects the group as well. So, for example, talking about the meeting idea. Okay, in an individualistic, okay, I'll talk about, hey, I'm going to share my ideas, versus a collectivist approach. Well, okay, is that something that's good for the harmony of the group right now? And actually, my TEDx talk, the one that's been published, touches specifically on that as well. As you might know, it brings up I'll bring up one statistic because we know the fish story. I won't tell the
We
whole
love
the whole
stats
talk.
too, but yeah,
The fish story that was used because there was a study that was done in the 1980s with a number of North American, specifically American participants, and Asians, including Japanese, and I think some other nationalities as well. And it was a video of a fish, a school of fish, and one fish that was kind of swimming in a different way than the rest of the fish. And they were just asked, okay, so give your impressions of what you're seeing here. So those from the North Americans tended to say, "Oh, well, that fish is leading the group. That fish is going its own way." But those from the Asian backgrounds, the Japanese, and so on, were saying something. I think it was 68% were more likely to say, "Oh, that fish is being influenced, like the fish is following the rest of the group, or the rest of the group is chasing it." In other words, that the group was influencing the fish, whereas the Americans, I think it was 78%, were saying, "Well, that fish is taking control of its own destiny and kind of doing its
Right.
own thing," right? And it was the exact same video. It was the exact same video,
Fascinating.
nothing different. So it wasn't what was happening in the video. It was based on the eye of the beholder, the person who was watching.
Mhm.
So that, I think, was a good demonstration of individualism versus collectivism affecting
Now
the way.
now I have a random question about this, which,
All
let's see if
right.
people can get this, is, are there cultures where it's hard to apologize or it's rude to apologize so that if you make a mistake, how do you get around that if you can't apologize? Do you know what I mean? Is that possible? Is that a scenario that can happen? I don't know. I was just curious.
Hmm, that is a good question. There isn't a culture that appears specifically to my mind. Um, but when you talk about apologizing, the way I think of it in terms of what might come up is not necessarily apologizing itself, but admitting that you've made a mistake.
Right.
And in some cultures, that is something where it can be like
Hmm.
that's something you're not supposed to do, particularly as an authority figure.
Right.
I think in North America, especially Canada, we kind of emphasize the idea of having accountability, and that a good leader will
Yeah.
will will owe up
Yeah.
to their mistakes. But there are some other cultures where that's really you don't if you do that, that undermines, that admits that you've somehow you're not fit to be that leader. So
Right.
promoting that front is so important. We talk about having face, and so on. And if you're a leader taking one approach, going to the other, it can undermine. There's one story I know, for example, of there was an American executive working national, and he specifically asked to be transferred to the Indian branch. And his approach was a very collectivist approach in terms of like getting opinions from his subordinates, asking them, "What do you think?" And that was the kind of approach. It worked very well for him in the U.S. And he took that approach when he was in the Indian office. And all of a sudden, he started to get this reputation that he was incompetent because the approach was, well, you're the manager. Shouldn't you know? Shouldn't you be the expert? Shouldn't you know what's going on? Like, why are you asking my opinion? And this was, so something that had worked very well for him in the US all of a sudden was he was getting this reputation as being incompetent because, he was asking, like, why is he asking my opinion? He should be telling me what to do. So that, I think is related to that idea of admitting you've made a mistake, or showing in some cultures what could be seen as, what we see as like being. I What's happening is my screensaver is coming up, and then it affects the camera as well. So if I'm blurring, that's
Yeah, as we lost your last like 5 seconds. You kind of tuned out there.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have to move my mouse around to make sure that the screensaver doesn't come up. So, but yes, my point was, in that case. So basically, what he ended up doing, he was able to resolve it. What he ended up doing is finding a middle point, because he didn't want to suddenly become this authoritarian figure and just say, "Hey, do this, and I'm the boss. So you do what I say," because it didn't fit his personality, and he knows the value that other people may have more knowledge than him, even if he's not supposed to admit that. So ultimately, what he ended up doing was setting this policy. It's like, okay, if you come to me with questions or something, with a problem, the rule is you have to bring in three solutions. So they had to, each person had to bring in three solutions, and I'll choose which one. so you,
Okay.
so it fit, because then it was encouraging the initiative that he was wanting to see from them. but he was also fulfilling their expectations of him being the ultimate person who makes the decision and being the knowledgeable leader. So I think not exactly what you were talking about, but
Yeah.
but it made me think about that, about like kind of admitting that you've made a mistake at the end of the
Okay.
day. Yeah,
And guys, we're here with two-time TEDx speaker John McGraw, and we're talking about cross-cultural challenges in the workplace. But also, I do want to talk a bit about TEDx because like yeah, I've done 5 TEDx talks, he's done 2, and so people are probably curious about that. Let's go back to the TEDx thing, which is and it's really it segues nice from your first talk was about this issue. And that's the one you did in January is the one that came out the video. Is that right?
that's right. That's
All
right.
right. So tell us a bit about what that talk was about.
Well, it's again the talk. Well, the title was when yes isn't yes. How cultural assumptions silence talent, and it all stemmed from um, basically how our own assumptions hide what we're expecting from other people because we have this particular lens. It's like, okay, a good leader is someone who speaks up, who always shares their opinions or something like that. And then we don't even necessarily know we have that lens. So then other people who could be just as good, but they show up in different ways, um, lose out, and then we lose out on their experience. So, and it all came from, uh, stemmed from a story, right? Which obviously, as you emphasize in your coaching, that having a story that ties all that together is essential, right? You can have all of this wonderful data, all these things, but it's not gonna land it's not gonna land with organizers. It's not gonna land with an audience. So the story was from my early years teaching in Japan,
Yeah.
where I had a student. He was middle aged businessman, Kenji. He was studying for an English test.
And guys, Kenji didn't come back. Uh,
Yeah,
I still feel this, but tell the story. It's good.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just a minute and a half. I'm not giving the whole talk here. So just
Yeah,
a
yeah,
minute
no,
and a
it's
half of
fine.
that
Just like
story.
yeah, the 30-second little quick story. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I was getting ready. Basically, he was getting ready for this test, the English test that can open better job opportunities overseas. And the point that I was teaching in the lesson the one day was about multiple choice strategy. And the key point was like, you know, don't leave anything blank. So just when in doubt, choose C because there's no penalty for guessing. So we practiced it multiple times, and I asked Kenji, "Do you understand?" And he said yes. And I thought it was going to go well. But when he handed the tests back, he had left several questions unanswered. And the whole point was just don't leave anything unanswered. It doesn't matter if you know or not, just pick some.
Right.
So I was really kind of stung. It made no sense to me. And when I would ask him a little bit more, why didn't you do that? He wouldn't. He didn't say anything. And I got so frustrated. I left the classroom. I complained in the teacher's room, and one of my colleagues looked at me and said, "Well, John, Kenji, he's Japanese and you're his teacher. He wouldn't disrespect you by saying he didn't understand. That would imply your instructions were bad." And that just blew my mind.
Right.
And, as you said, Bobby, the thing that really hurt was that he never came back. So I never got to say to him, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry." So I was showing up because, of course, growing up in Canada, and I'm sure it's the same in many Western European countries and in America. Hey, you ask questions all the time in class. That shows that you're paying attention. You challenge ideas because that shows that you're engaged. But for Kenji, it was the complete opposite, right?
Yeah.
A good student listens and asks questions, and you say yes, not necessarily because you agree, but just because it's a way of showing you're listening. Okay,
Mhm.
okay, it's a way of showing respect, and you don't ask questions because it can be disrespectful to the teacher. Right? And I didn't understand that, and because I didn't understand that, I failed my role as a teacher in that circumstance. So and that just made me think, well, how many other circumstances where people say, oh, this person, they're just not a good fit. We don't
Mhm.
get why. Um, because of a complete misunderstanding. We have completely different ideas and of the way the world should work, and we don't understand each other's. And if we can understand that, like how many problems could be solved if we just had the time to just, beyond like a situation in the classroom. Like look at the world right now. How many things could be solved if we just took a little bit of understanding of where the other person's coming from, the circumstances they grew up in, what values are important to them, and being able to bridge that by adjusting just a little bit. And how could I adjust my teaching? Um, and I did adjust my teaching, working with
Sure.
future students, to be more inclusive. Instead of asking, "Do you understand?" "Yeah, okay, so can you explain it back to me?" And because I understood that they were not going to ask questions directly because that would be insulting to them, and I could explain in my culture, okay, it's okay to do that, and I certainly did that, but I can't necessarily expect them to suddenly change to
Sure.
fit me, right? I have
Yeah.
to do work a little bit that way as well. And that's basically the focus of the talk. It's like, how much
Yeah.
more can we do? Um,
And everybody listening in here, like if you are liking the conversation or you have questions about TEDx talks or cross-cultural workplace issues, put them in the chat. You're more than welcome to. Even after you watch the replay, you can actually share and reach out to us. We're happy to have to do that. Now,
mhm.
I know you were gunning for the TEDx talk. So when you land the TEDx talk, how did that actually feel when you got that message?
Well, I have to tell you. So the message that I had, and I think it's maybe different than what it is for most people. Like not the feeling, but in terms of the message, because it was at a university. Specifically, it was at Queen's University, right? TEDx, which anyone in Canada knows that's a pretty prominent university. And they didn't just send me a message. I got a phone call from them.
Wow.
It was the organizers, these university students, and they had me on speakerphone and they said, "Hi, we're here to let you know, and we want to let you know that we want you to speak at TEDx." And they woo, they said a woo. I said woo right after as well. It was just
That's
like
great.
it was such an incredible feeling of, beyond even just getting. I mean, I would have been, of course, ecstatic if I'd even just gotten like an email or something like that, like I
Yeah.
most events. But the fact that they took that extra effort, and I mean, of course, I sent the message. I recorded a message to you, WhatsApp message to the group, and said,
Yeah.
"Oh, my feeling." I think also, let out a big woo as well for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just, all of the effort and all the, I know like how many people had to go through and, experienced rejection as well for other events
Sure.
where I had interviews and didn't get accepted or didn't even hear back a couple of times. So to finally get that and to finally say, "Hey, we want one of you as one of the 8 speakers." From the dozens that had applied, even more, and the dozens that had been interviewed. That was incredible.
And what do you think worked best for you in terms of landing that TEDx talk? Like, what do you think was something that made it work for you?
Well, I mean, definitely it was the story in particular because anchoring that story,
Yeah.
um, I actually did it in person live. I had the interview because I had the option of doing it in video, but I chose to actually go in person. And it was,
Right.
from where we are, it's about a 2-3 hour drive.
Yeah.
But I think that dedication as well.
Okay.
But having the story to say, okay, here's who I am. Like going through the whole process that we go through, Bobby, of like, okay, here's who I am. Here's the credibility. Here's the story. And here's why it's relevant to your audience. And
Yeah.
being able to link that together smoothly and being able to say that within 5 minutes, which was what
Yeah.
the limit was, I think really landed. And I could see as I was telling the story, the organizers and they were really like, they were really leaning in,
Yeah.
and I could
Yeah.
see,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I knew it was like, okay, I've got them, and just being able to connect with them on a level where I wasn't being this kind of like, I'm this grand expert, coming to grace my presence with you. I was relating to them, and I think in part, being able to say, hey, if you've got feedback, I'm always open for feedback. And even at the end when we were finishing up, is like, my wife and I, we drove down here. We're going to be sticking around for a few hours. Where's some good places to go for lunch?
Yeah.
And, one of the organizers is like, "Oh, well, I work part-time at this restaurant here. You should go there." And so we went there, and I think, beyond the ideas, as you've said before, Bobby, really being able to show that you are someone who can work well with them,
Yep.
that is not gonna cause problems for them.
Yep.
I don't know how much language you wanna use in here. I know it's not like sincere, but, not being an asshole,
Yeah.
basically.
For sure.
Just the don't
I
get
would say don't be a douche. Like, just,
Yeah,
be
yeah, or
responsive.
don't be a douche.
I mean,
Yeah,
I tell everybody, look, you have to have a story and a topic and title idea that everyone can get very, very quickly and easily. And then when you pitch it, let them know you're going to be amazingly supportive and engaging when they respond to you. Like, do everything you can. So those things I think are incredibly important. And actually, by the way, just a couple of days ago, it turned out that I was talking to one of my daughter's friends' father. It was like a school event, and he spoke at your TEDx Queens. His name's Mark. Uh,
Mark, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so
I
he's like,
know
"Yeah,
Mark.
he's like, "My TEDx events it's come out." I'm like, "Okay, great." And I was giving some tips on how to promote it. And he's like, "Wait, which one was it?" He's like, "Queen." He's like, "Well, do you know John?" He's like, "Oh, yeah." And he remembered you. I was like,
Yeah,
"This is crazy." So,
yeah, and
uh,
he did an incredible talk, amazing.
yeah,
Thumbs
yeah.
out
So I
for
thought
sure.
so I was just kind of funny how it just randomly came that way. And then, when you actually were applying, you got a second talk very, very quickly. So
That's right.
then how did that feel?
Yeah, well, that was amazing. The fact that I got a second talk, and it was literally within a couple of weeks,
Yeah,
of
I
each
remember.
other, getting that, and that was amazing. That was for another university, U of T, the Scarborough campus. Um, the thing at the same time, there was a little bit of a panic because what happened was, I gave the same pitch, right? It was
Right. Yeah,
the
yeah.
same pitch, the same talk, because of course, obviously you're pitching the same talk to multiple audiences, and I thought at first I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's like, oh, but am I going to do the same talk? Can I do the same talk? Like, what's going on? And as you know, I reached out to you,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get some advice on that. Like, should I say something? Should I do that? And I think, your advice was, well, you don't necessarily have to say anything, but just once you get into the meeting, with them, just adjust, change it a little bit, because depending on the organizers, in theory, you can do the exact same talk, as I've heard. But the issue is that, as I understand, and Bobby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you
Yeah.
obviously know more about this than me. But my understanding is, if you do the exact same talk, you know, it, you're not going to get a second video up on the TEDx channel, because why would they have, two different videos of the exact same talk? So the whole point is, of course, well, if I'm going to do two TEDx talks, I want two videos out there doing two different
Right.
talks.
Yeah.
So, what it came down to was basically, working with it and saying, "Hey, I like this. I've got this like different idea of how I'd like
Yeah,
to
we shifted
approach it."
things a little bit.
Shifted things around.
Yeah.
So it was still kind of the same. It was ultimately ended up being in a similar theme, but I used different stories. Where the previous one, the first one was more about unseen talent. The second one had more of a lens of belonging, and
Right.
crazy bus guy and the stories we tell ourselves. That was the,
Yeah.
the topic of that, where I connected with some other events, and I think that they appreciated it, because then it also felt like, and hey, I'm giving something that's exclusively to you, right?
Mhm.
So it's not the other
And
talk thing.
and in a way, what I was doing was I was actually coaching John on the culture of TED and TEDx organizers, because it's different. Like John also, is doing speaking as well. And when you're pitching speaking, it's different than pitching TEDx talks. And so when you're working with academic or institutions or students, it's different than talking to corporates. And so in a manner of speaking, I was also looking at the cultural aspect of how to communicate and negotiate and navigate the TEDx culture, which it does have its own culture. And I think that's
Mhm.
important for everyone to understand. And look, the truth is, ultimately, you have to look after your own brand and do what's best for you in your business. So I was like, well, you need to have two talks that are different, and they can still be around the same topic of expertise. And now you have two-time TEDx speaker and they're both with that topic, which I think is great. Um,
Yeah.
can you talk a bit about the so what have been the benefits then of now being a TEDx speaker or a two-time TEDx speaker in terms of your brand and your business and more speaking, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think, even eh, the talk itself, as you know, has only been published for a week, but even before that, just being able to say, that I'm a
Right.
two times
Oh,
TEDx
you've
speaker.
leveraged it very well.
People,
You've done a really good job of promoting and talking about it. It's
yeah,
been great.
yeah, yeah. People all of a sudden, treat with more credibility. Like oh wow, oh you're a TEDx speaker. Wow, oh you're a two times TEDx speaker. Then people I've noticed, pay more attention to you as
Yep.
well. When you're pitching ideas, when you're getting yourself out there
Yep.
to other speaking. I think it's opened up other opportunities for me for speaking, and I think it's given some credibility. We did well, of course, the event that you participated in, right?
Yeah.
The intercultural exchange, where I had people sharing stories. And Bobby, you shared a story yourself
Yeah.
about experiences, meeting your wife and so on. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that being able to pitch that, helps to get people to come out. I've had people even approach me saying, "Hey, how do I, you know, you, you just have that greater credibility as a speaker." I think of
And let me ask you this though. Let me ask you this though. Like, does it help you with being more? So you said, obviously it's easier to have conversation with people. They're more open. Do you think that leads to more business or paying a higher, getting a higher price and things like that?
Absolutely, yeah. It certainly, justifies because,
Right.
I don't even have to when I put in, and sometimes I have to remember, myself, because before that, sometimes when you're putting out a proposal, it's like, oh, okay, uh, like for me, sometimes I question myself. I think we all have that
We all do
to
that.
different
It's
extent,
fine.
right? Imposter syndrome is like, oh well, I don't know, can I justify this price kind of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
And now I have this greater confidence, like, well, hey, I've got along with everything else, I'm a two times TEDx speaker, so I can put it out there, and I don't have to. I don't even necessarily have to. I mean, I do put it there, but I'm not sort of pushing. Hey, I'm a two times TEDx speaker, so you have to pay me this. But it's because it's there, and they know. I say, this is my fee, and I don't really get as much pushback, right, in
Right.
that. So
Right.
because
Yeah.
I have that,
Yeah, and the point I'm trying to make and trying to confirm here is that, number one, it certainly creates authority and trust more and credibility to who you are. But ultimately, it also leads to more clients, higher fees, more speaking. And so your business gets it positively impacted by getting building that. Is that fair?
absolutely, yes, yeah,
And then
absolutely,
the other thing I think is that comes up is the impact on your confidence, right? So
yes.
you're more confident in the room, you're more confident reaching out to people, you're more confident with your price. You're more confident because what I saw was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna," 'cause I saw you, I'm gonna show up on, because I know you're doing other things too besides TEDx, you're also showing up on media, but you're confidently showing up on media, you're confidently decide, "I'm gonna run an event," like that confidence, I
Yeah,
think, also has come from this, experience.
absolutely. Yeah, it's made a big difference because I know, okay, I've been on that red dot, right? I've done that. I've done through the challenges. I've gone through, not just getting on the stage, but getting prepared for the stage because as you know, there's so much preparation and practicing to get it right and to nail that so that the talk itself is going to be good. So I've gone through that experience. So then when I'm showing up on stage elsewhere, it's like, hey, I've done this before. I've made this happen. So what else can I make happen? As you said, having the confidence of emceeing that event, organizing that event, the intercultural exchange, and the next one is going to come up in October. And being able to have that knowing, hey, I've done some pretty challenging things before, some stuff that's let's be honest, it's pretty impressive. right? Not
Yeah.
to be too arrogant about it, but you have to
Sure.
give. I think we have to give ourselves credit. It's like, hey, accomplished
No,
something.
listen, being a TEDx
Yeah,
speaker is great. Being a five-time TEDx speaker is fantastic because it's definitely proof of
yeah,
concept. They know they're getting a storyteller, a speaker, an expert, someone who can really engage like that. That's important. Now, the audience here are mostly small business owners, entrepreneurs, side hustlers, all that kind of
mhm.
stuff. What will be your message for them in terms of the importance of adding a TEDx talk to their, I guess, their authority and trust building strategy?
Yeah, well, I think that the reach that you can get with having a TEDx talk can really make a difference. And when I talk about reach, it doesn't necessarily mean having like thousands of views or millions of views. But I think in terms of just being able to have that TEDx brand, and because ultimately it doesn't matter if you have millions of people, it matters if you have the right people watching it.
Right.
And then when they see you there, that, oh well, someone else has clearly valued their expertise to have them on the TEDx stage. So that, I think, lends you that authority, makes builds that trust, helps you to build trust a lot more easily as well. So
Mhm.
there's huge benefits to that.
Yeah.
And yeah, uh,
No, what you were saying, go ahead.
yeah, just to add on that, I think one thing that people are saying, since we were talking about the stories, some people might be worrying, oh well, I don't know if I have I don't really have any stories.
Yeah.
And we all have stories. And I think that that's one thing in particular that I've learned from working with you, Bobby, because that's, of course, one of the first things you do is like, okay, let's find the
I
story.
gave 3 or 4 random ones just today, just now.
Right? Right?
Ones I haven't
And
talked about in, like, decades. It just came to me. The lamb chop thing. I mean, come on.
that's amazing, right? And that, of course, comes with all of that practice, right? It's a
Yeah, yeah,
skill like anything else, right? That you can develop. And it's just finding, like, sometimes it's, and honestly, like, look how much mileage you could get out of that, like, from just the lamb chop story, because it could be something really simple, but you can like, you put metaphors into it of like adapting to cultures or things like that. There's a lot you can get out of it. And I think it's realizing, hey, even something that seems very mundane or not really special, it doesn't have to be something like surviving
yeah,
a traumatic event. Like, that's sometimes when we think about, oh well, that those are the only stories that are good stories. No, it's the story that's going to relate to people, that can people relate to, and that carry your message. So if you're worried, oh, I don't have any good stories, no, you just take some time. You may be, if you work through it, you'll be surprised at how
well,
much you can get.
yeah, one of the things I do with all my clients is I say, "Look, let's go through your entire life story document and extract as many stories as we can. This is good for personal branding. This is good for content. This is good for TEDx pitches. This is good for speaking." And so I take all my clients through that process because once you start doing it, you start to have the neurons start firing. You start thinking of other things. You start making connections, and all of a sudden, now you have tons and tons of stories you can do. And look, the rack of lamb story that with that uncle there, like I don't think I've ever talked about that as a content piece or a post, but yeah, there's a lesson there. I mean, I certainly could
Absolutely.
use that,
Yeah.
and I probably will and should. So I think maybe some other time I will definitely do that. And for those who are watching, I mean, I want to talk a bit more about the cross cultural stuff before we kind of close. Again, if you have a question about TEDx and how it works and things like that, and how it's going to build your brand, your authority, trust, and all of that, just message me on Substack by all means, and you're more than welcome to. I'm more than welcome to share that with you, or come by one of my calls that I'm doing with TLB Club. Come in as my guest. You have to DM me though if you want to be a guest, and I'll happily kind of share, get to meet you and things like that. But going back to the cross cultural thing, let's talk about the cross cultural, the intercultural event, right? So,
Mhm.
one of the reasons why I like to tell stories is because when I tell stories about anything, whether it's marrying my white wife and the mixed culture of that, having mixed kids. So whether I talk about marrying the white wife and the in laws, her parents and my parents, that culture clash. When I talk about the culture clash of my kids who are we call them beige because they're brown and white. Do they identify as brown or white or both or neither? I mean, it's something that they, and as a parent who's neither of those things, we have to kind of raise them and support them as best we can. And but the other thing I'll say is that when you tell your story, there's someone out there who realizes, you know what, I feel that way too, or I'm not alone. And that's the reason why I tell these stories
Yes.
when it comes to what we're all going through. And look, culture is many different things. There's cultures and subcultures and so many different types of things. But I think that telling the story goes a long way. Finding seeing different stories will actually, resonate with a larger group of people. Um, but maybe tell us a bit more about, kind of why you're doing this event and what are you hoping to get out of it.
Well, yeah, the intercultural exchange. I think for me, it's exactly what you said. It's the point of showing people that they're not alone. Because I think when it comes to when we talk about intercultural studies or cross cultural studies, like one time, people who are in international business sort of know about that. I mean, people who are in academia,
Yeah.
but the average person doesn't necessarily know. Like on a, of course, instinctual level, like, okay, connecting with people from other cultures, yes, but they don't necessarily know that there's this whole field and there's this explanation and terminology for it. So it means that it's not something that maybe a lot of people think about on a very conscious level, maybe on a more subconscious level.
Mm.
So the purpose that I wanted for this is to kind of take it, these experiences and get away from, say, the academic explanations or these frameworks, and bring it into everyday life, and as you said, so people realize, hey, I'm not alone. And the first theme, as you talked about, was like love beyond borders, which is why I got you,
Right.
asked you to share your story with your wife, because that's something that's so relatable. And then, the thing that was incredible, and you saw it yourself, was like so many people like, wow, I didn't know I was alone about that. I've never seen somebody do it.
Yeah.
Or it's that people, felt the same way. I sort of felt that, but I never had anybody to talk about it. And that was incredible. Like just the energy in that room, of people. And, we had a few people, had this opportunity where others could come up after the scheduled speakers would come up and sharing these stories, and
Yeah.
just, yeah, the energy was incredible. And that's what I want to do, beyond having, say, okay, here's an event that are for, say, just newcomers, or these are events. I want to have like everybody, because that's the whole point. Whether you were born in Canada, whether you moved here, you're second generation or whatever, we all have these experiences, of even moving inside Canada. Like, you move from Toronto to Calgary or vice versa, you're going to get some
Different.
cultural
Yes.
differences there,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So it's
I mean,
just,
I grew up on the east coast of Canada, New Brunswick, which is very different than when I moved to Toronto. So, and also I lived in Montreal for many years. So that those to me, those are three. And also I lived in Vancouver for a little bit. Those are four very different cultures with even within Canada. Although Canada's a very, very large country. So
yeah.
that's that. Yeah. So I totally agree with that. And everybody who's listening in, guys, thanks so much, John, for being here. I do this I'm now doing a Substack live stream every Friday at 4 p.m. I may multi-stream once a month, so that would this one's on multi-stream. But I'm thinking next week I might put this on Substack, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok all at the same time because I do love multi-streaming. But I only do them once a month. It's always at 4 p.m. Next week, I'm looking at talking about the social media ban for 16 under 16 kids. I'm very passionate about that. For many who know me, I didn't give my kids a smartphone until they're grade 12. My daughter who's finishing grade 10 still has a flip phone. And I talk about the dangers, as much as being a social media influencer and someone who champions technology and AI, the danger. I also know about the dangers. And because of that, I made the difficult choice to not allow my kids certain things. There's certain things they do, and they sometimes borrow my phone or they do stuff on a laptop. But, I made a choice that only 0.01% of parents are doing. So I'm bringing a couple of experts to talk about the ban, the good part of it, the bad part of it, what we need to do. That's going to be next week. And I'm also looking for other speakers that want to come in and share knowledge as long as it's relevant to the audience here that's on Substack. And, for the stuff I talk about, business, brand, but I'm also happy to talk about parenting or things I'm passionate about. Culture is very important to me as well. So I certainly love talking about that. And so that's why I'm glad that you were here today to share this knowledge. And between us, we were averaging 3.5 TEDx talks. So
Nice.
that's a
That's
pretty good average, man. So, so, so everyone's listening in. Thank you so much for being here today, John. Any kind of final thoughts on TEDx talks, cross cultural stuff that you want the audience to remember, and maybe to give them a bit of a pitch of how they can follow you?
Yeah, I think, if you're wondering about whether should I do this, can I do this, give a TEDx talk. Um, all it takes is an idea and a story. And I think that anybody, if you just have a belief in yourself, you can do it, and you can get that focus on like how to deliver the message that's going to land with people. You can do it. And in terms of following me, my handle, John Edward McGraw, is one word. That's me on LinkedIn. That's me on Instagram. That's me on Facebook. There's also the Intercultural Exchange, so you can get to the socials there. Also, websites dedicated to both me, same name, johnedwardmcgraw.com, and the interculturalexchange.com. So happy to do that, and we'll be to connect. If you want to send a message to me, let me know what you thought about our conversation here, or want to know more about the Intercultural Exchange, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And you can follow me on Substack. You can follow me on my website, rayhan.com, or the Thought Leadership Branding .club, which is where TLB Club is. And of course, I'm on across all the socials too under Rayhan Bobby, which are my two names. And again, even the Rayhan Bobby thing is a cross cultural thing because
Right.
the reason I got Bobby is because when I was a baby, we had a nanny and she couldn't say Rayhan, so she started calling me Bobby. And next thing you know, I got Bobby as my name, and my parents put on my birth certificate. And I was like, "What is this? What's this other name?" They're like, it's Rayhan. It's your first name." I'm like, "Oh, really? I didn't know that." So I'm living these different. I'm living a cross cultural life my whole life. And that's probably why I
Yeah.
married a white girl. Who knows? But thanks everybody for being here today, and check out the replay, and we'll share snippets of these talks later on as well. But hopefully, see you guys next time. And if you have any questions, reach out. Thank you, John. Thanks everybody. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks so much.
Bye.